On behalf of Pierre Rucci, the Executive Director of the Swiss Press Club, and my colleagues who are here, I welcome you, and I'm very happy to give the floor immediately to Mr. Stéphane Grabert. You are the FIATA Director General, and you are going to tell us everything we want to know about the purpose of this conference, and also from FIATA, and you will, of course, introduce then FIATA President Dr. Ivan Petrov. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So, good morning to all of you and the one who follow us online. So, welcome here to this press conference at the occasion of our headquarter meeting in Geneva. That is titled Navigating Uncertainty. So this headquarter meeting is the main meeting bringing together all our association members here in Geneva between the 18th and 21st of March in Geneva. And for which purpose are we bringing all our association members here is because we live in a world that is becoming very, very changing. So there is quick change, uncertainty due to war risk, due to fears of pandemics. You have a very changing geopolitical landscape. We saw what happens with the movement and the alternance between lack and excess of capacity in the transport, which has directly implication on the prices of transport, which also impacted the prices of the goods for the customers. And so today we need to adapt to this world. This world has been exposed to a lot of changes, and quick changes with the pandemic and the period after. And it's important to be able to sit down with our member and see how we can bring a little bit more stability to logistics, how we can address the challenges. And I will come back later on the different priorities of the organization that are linked to this new context in which we are active today. So I'm happy to give the floor now because I think it's good to start with the beginning, which is FIATA, what it is, and what we are doing as freight forwarders, because I had the discussion before asking me what does a freight forwarder. So let's start from the beginning, FIATA, and I give the floor, and I'm happy to welcome the president of FIATA, Dr. Ivan Petrov. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Stéphane, and thank you for your invitation and for being present here today online. We are on the second year in a row coming here to Geneva, and we are very happy to have the new headquarters here as FIATA after almost 100 of years of establishing this association in the German-speaking world area in Europe, in Vienna in 1926 actually. What a challenging slogan we have this year, navigating uncertainty, and what is not more challenging for the freight forwarders, who are the architects of logistics, supply chain and transport. And this is the biggest organization in the transport sector as non-governmental organization worldwide, and we are having actually presentation in 150 countries, and members among these association members that are members are also around 40,000 companies. Actually, a question, why Bulgarian Association, where is my home country, became member? Okay, we are very long member for not establishing countries members, but however, we have been decades of membership, not as Bulgarian Association, which came later on in '92 after being changed from our economy, different, we succeeded from the previous country. But the mostly important was advocacy and possibility to be advocated. And we have a very good example in '97. after 2 visits of the FIATA president those days into Bulgaria, the newly made law of value-added tax, it was introduced law which was new for Bulgarian system. You know, we were coming from a different eco-society, and it was totally challenging and against the interests of FIATA, of the freight forwarders, and it was withdrawn on the second visit. The day of the visit was withdrawn by the government. So it's so important if you can use the tools. Of course, you can have a lot of best practice examples, how you learn what you need to do in your business life. You have a lot of facilitation procedures, you have a lot of digitalization, you have vocational training, which is very, very important. And of course, a lot of networking possibilities, which is valid for the companies. And here we cite our vision mission, the largest federation and voice of global logistics serving its entire ecosystem. It fosters the knowledge of its members to ensure a sustainable and resilient supply chain. This is very well said in a short version. And now, FIATA objectives, what I told you in a few words is an example of Bulgaria, but it's done for the global, and we unite the freight forwarders worldwide. We represent, promote, and protect the industry, interests of this industry, and familiarize trade, industry, and public with our services and the perspective what we can be done. And we have standardizing procedures and to improve the quality of these services. And of course, we assist with these vocational training standards that we levied as a world standard for vocational training, which was one of the best in the world in this industry. And also we have a lot of insurance issues tackled, risks, electronic documents, digitalization as processes and data processing, and all these new developments that is very valid for today's world. Stefan, you can continue. We have split the presentation into few.
Thank you. So yes, thank you very much, Mr. President. So for the if we look today at the world I described, we define, and the presidency of FIATA defined a certain number of priorities. The first one, they are not particularly in order, but the first one I would like to mention is multimodal corridor optimization and capacity building support. Corridors is something that has become much more popular recently in Europe following the war between Ukraine and Russia, because as you know, there were the routes that were used to go from east and to Europe were strongly disrupted by the wars at the door of Europe. And it was very important to be able to find out alternatives to ensure that transport of goods can continue from East and to Europe. And we have done extensive work on with coordination committee of the UNEC, Joint Chamber of Commerce, on Caspian transport route, because that's today, and knowing if you take a southern route, which route, and all the problems that are along the way to bring the goods to Europe. So that's one of the work, but it's also the case in other continents. We recently, in January, had a very interesting discussion with all the countries in South America about the corridors in this continent. So how to connect the countries effectively to ensure a good flow, a seamless flow of goods across the continent. It's also linked to two very important topics that are the WTO TFA guidance, so the free trade agreements, the TFA agreements, so really facilitating the trade facilitation agreement of WTO, the implementation of it. There is at WTO, and it was the case before the pandemic, a lot of work on facilitating trade globally. The pandemic showed that we need to accelerate the implementation. Every country, not every, but some countries have established already committees for facilitation trade, and this work needs to be stronger in order to facilitate trade, because facilitating trade, and it's the topic also of this press conference, is also ensuring optimization in the transport of goods and more affordable goods, because the cost of transport is also part of the transport of goods. So that's, and it's linked also to a third area, that is authorized economic operators, because when you cross borders, you need to deal with customs. And so here there are also a lot of work done by our members on these authorized economic operators. So it's agreement that allows to fulfill certain conditions, and then having more facilities to cross the borders, because you are known already from the customs, they know what you are doing, and you fulfill a certain criteria. Then digitalization. I don't need to say that the pandemic has accelerating the digitalization of our industry. We are working on the digitalization of transport document. It's very important. FIATA has some documents that are very much used, that are the bill of lading, the FIATA bill of lading, and this is used for the transport of goods. And it was important here to really tackle this problematic of paper and going paperless. When you have transport of goods across the world, there is a lot of paper coming from the shipper, from the freight forwarders, and we need to move on now to something that is more digital, where we can have more optimization in the process, instead of losing time and waiting that papers are coming to a port, so that we can clear and have the goods, and have the goods moving on. So they are stuck because we don't have a certain transport paper that are somewhere traveling in the world. So all this work by digitization will help to first also have this information on data. And when we say data, then it will allow the different actors to share these data and to be able to then be much more optimized. Today, a freight forwarder will enter the data in one system, in another system, in a third system, and in fact, it's a loss of time. It creates a lot of issues of inconsistencies. So if we can work with all the actors in the supply chain to be able to say, okay, the freight forwarders has these data, he will share what is necessary with the shippers, so the shipping line, that will then, and you don't need to go through manual re-entering of this data, you will save a lot of money. I think if there are some studies that were published, the digitalization of transport document, we talk about some billions that can be saved in the economic world. So then supporting the industry to meet the SDGs, so all the problematic of environment, decarbonisation is a very important one. We see it every day, so, and as a person, we are sensitive to the importance of environment. It's the case also for freight forwarders. They are really the one, as the president said, the architects of the transport and the logistics, and therefore they have a role to play to try to help this industry to decarbonize. It's a role that is for the whole supply chain, and it's not only the carriers, so the shipping lines or the airlines that needs to decarbonize. They need to be able to work with their customers and with the freight forwarders that are part of this ecosystem in order to manage this decarbonization. So it's not an objective from only the freight forwarders or only one actor in the chain. It's a common challenge that we need to address, and we will address this. We will have some interesting discussion during this HQ meeting involving the World Shipping Council, involving commodity trading companies in energy here in Switzerland and in Geneva, and freight forwarders, so that we bring together everyone in order to see, okay, how can we make it possible in a way that it's also economically sustainable. And addressing global geopolitical challenges. So I discuss it with the corridors. I don't come back to that. Vocational training. There is, following the pandemic, like in every industry, a lack of workforce. We need to bring people to the industry. We need to help and train the new generation of people that will work on logistics. The expectation for logistician is evolving, more digitalization, complex environmental aspects, collaboration with different actors, where sometimes in the past we were maybe more in competition. So there is, the world is evolving. The complexity of the role of freight forwarders is evolving, and training, bringing new talents to this industry is absolutely key. And it's an industry that still, logistics is not so well understood or known by the general public, but the pandemic show how logistics is key, because without logistics, without freight forwarders, nobody would have had masks, would have had a vaccine. So it's a very key point. So training remains really fundamental. We need to help our members to access a very well-trained, skilled workforce. And finally, cybersecurity. With digitalization, the next step that came is cybersecurity, and we need here to help our members. The freight forwarding industry, and the members of FIATA are thousands and 100,000 of small and medium companies across the world that today are starting to exchange more data than in the past, because before they were more working and relying on paper. So by the consequence on this is also to know how do you protect your system, how do you protect your technology, because we are leaving more and more the paper for the digital. So that gives you a little bit an overview of the main theme that FIATA will address during the HQ meeting, and that are also the priorities set by the presidency for 2023.
And now we move on to our Senior Vice President, Jens Römer.
Yes, also from my side, welcome and good morning. Can we have the next slide? So the next slide says FIATA's work on sea transport. But before I go into what we have done within the association, I think I would like to commend and respect those who have done the real work. As Stefan has mentioned, FIATA is global, represents associations all over the world. We have teams working within for our members and our member companies. And I would go as far to say that it's been our teams, our human resources, who came to the rescue of global supply chains. The last 2 years have been very difficult for our teams because of the disruptions. We had to plan transport a couple of times, only for them to be cancelled again, because there was simply no planning certainty, and it's put a lot of pressure on our human but the productivity was non-existent. But but it is thanks to the know-how of our human resources that we rescue to a high degree global supply chains. And once again, it has proven that digitalization, as mentioned by Stefan, is important. Artificial intelligence and whatever is coming our way is important, and our members are on track, but you have to take your human resources along. And I think that is a very, very important statement, and that we have to respect that it's been our professional human resources who have done a great job. But okay, let's go back to the Working Group C and what we have done. To start with, again, I would like to thank, I'm very, very lucky. I have team members in my working group with global representation, and these are all captains of the industry, so there's a lot of potential within my working group. And obviously, work has been very simple because there was a lot of attention on the disruptions, which allowed us also to be extremely active, but things have changed. There's no more congestions, the fluidity is back, prices are down. So our problem is that the main conditions, the basic conditions, they are still there. But possibly we got less attention. For example, we still have to deal with unfair demurrage and detention. There is still no reliability because vessels, for different reasons, are being rolled continuously or blanked. And of course, there's unfair competition. But let's go through the activities that we did last year. We published a position paper. The basic context was fair competition. And I mean, competition is good. We are in a free market. Yeah, so if you have additional competition, it should strengthen the market and the choice and the consumer, the maritime customers, they want choice. But it must be fair. It must be on a fair level playing field. And as I mentioned before, that is not necessarily the case. There's as far as shipping lines is concerned, there's a tonnage tax, block exemptions, and it's all mentioned in the paper. We commented on the OSRA. I mean, that's an extremely important development in the USA. The OSRA has been discussed, has been implemented, because one stakeholder has become very dominating. Our shipping line have been very dominating, and the FMC have noticed that, so the FMC within the OSRA has received a lot more power. Above all, obviously, always related to demurrage and detention, but there are also control mechanisms in place. So that's been a very, very important development for our trade. Of course, we've consulted in 4 public consultations in Australia, USA, Europe, and the 4th one, Australia. So that's of course very much in the center of FIATA. We have to lobby, we have to protect our members. So when it comes to consultations of regulators, we have to be there and we have to present our cases. Yeah, but what is not mentioned actually is that we also did a lot of webinars, and that is very, very close to my heart. The functioning of the maritime supply chain depends on various stakeholders working together. We may have different opinions, and I probably have been critical to one or the other stakeholder in the recent comments, and we have to argue our case because that is our opinion. And this is just natural. However, no single stakeholder should have the power to enforce one-sided decisions to dominate. But anyway, with all respect to opinions and disagreement, it is our global maritime supply chain and our responsibility. When I say our, all stakeholders have to put their head together to continuously improve the supply chain in the interest of the consumer. So we must communicate, we must have dialogues, and this is exactly what we've done in our webinars. We had fantastic webinars where also the World Shipping Council was represented. We had Rebecca Dye from the FMC. So I think that is important. We need dialogue. We can always have different opinion. I should, of course, also refer a little bit to the future. So on our agenda, as mentioned on the slide, the sustainability level playing field will always be there. Then, of course, the single maritime window, data protection, and minimum service level we are discussing. But let me mention a few things on sustainability. Of course, this is a major subject here for our headquarter meeting in Geneva, and it will culminate also later on in Brussels. In October, we have the World Congress in Brussels. It will be a major subject. As I just mentioned, I mean, our industry has been very busy in rescuing the supply chain, and our industry will always use the existing providers of maritime services, of shipping lines. Yeah, and there one can argue whether the choice is good enough with a handful of shipping lines organized in 3 global alliances. But our strength, the strength of our industry, is flexibility. We have to offer choice and flexibility to our customers. So also when it comes to sustainability, carbon emissions, we have to use the choices that we have available. So it is very important for FIATA now to bring sustainability much more on the foreground of our members, because coming out of the last 2 years has not been easy for our members. Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of people leaving the industry, burnouts. So we got to be realistic. We deal with human resources. Okay, so it's up to FIATA now to put sustainability on a much higher level, as mentioned by Stefan. So we have identified within FIATA the developments, and it is our mission to guide and lead our members into the next few years. So towards the other stakeholders, I mean, so we guide our members, that's our main objective, but of course we also want to be a partner to the other stakeholders, as I mentioned. We want dialogue. So of course we have to create know-how within FIATA on sustainability, on developments, in order to be a partner to the other stakeholders for discussions. The vessels are not ours, but we talk to customers. We have a lot more customers because we represent above all the small and medium-sized industry. Possibly volumes in terms of containers handled by our industry is maybe 60%, 50%, I've got no idea. But one thing I know, we talk about 90% of the number of customers. Yeah, and there's a lot of know-how transfer to be done, because when I talk, it's our supply chain, it's also our world. Yeah, and it's about time that we move on, that also the maritime supply chain is taking action, which is not going to be easy. I mean, for all of you, it's probably difficult to decide what car to buy. Yeah, and for a car, you talk about 5, 6, 7 years you are going to drive, and it's national regulations. Maritime is global. So we need stakeholders to give, but we need regulators to create the rules how to compete and deal in future. So sustainability is a very, very important subject also on our side. Then the next slide, please. Yeah, I think what is important, I mentioned that it's been tough for our industry to plan and reschedule container positioning. At the same time, shipping lines and terminals try to increase fluidity by reducing the number of free days. You only have a certain number of days to pick up or deliver containers into the port. And these days, these timelines, they've become far too short. So it's become a rat race. So there's a rat race to beat the free period term. And by having this rat race, you basically export problems from the terminal on the landside infrastructure. Yeah, and whether it's Hamburg or Antwerp or or other ports, I mean, congestion is very, very common. It's not going to get much better. So the landside infrastructure is suffering also because of this free time, because the time limits to deliver or pick up containers should be much wider. And if you look into the export, you have all kind of deadlines. You have got the VGM documents, you have AMS systems. So it is extremely, and I mean, when I remember a time I delivered a container 2 days prior to vessel departure. It's impossible. Because of all the regulations, today it's 4 days. Yeah, and then if you then have a holiday or so, there's no more free time period. So if the fluidity was a reason to decrease the free time, then the reason is gone. Statistics say that about 15% of the container capacity was stuck in congestion. So these 15% of containers are back into the fluidity. I do believe that empty depots are overflooding with containers. There are plenty of empty containers. So I think it is extremely logical and a no-brainer in the interest of all the stakeholders to increase the free time periods to at least back to the same terms we used to have prior to the pandemic. So they must increase. In addition to that, I mean, of course, I mean, we needed all containers that are available. Who cares about the quality in the past, in the last 2 years? If you were able to ship, you just ship. So now is the time to review, and of course, shipping lines have to provide containers that are fit for purpose. So now is the time to review the containers, to check whether they are fit for purpose, to repair them, to make sure that all the assets are in the condition that they should be to allow global container transport. So they should be maintained, they should be reviewed, and possibly taken out of circulation if the quality is that bad. Thank you. That was from my side, Stefan.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We are now ready to take questions. I would like to ask you to introduce the media you represent and to whom you address your question. My name is Louisa Balin, and we are ready to have your question. Yes, sir.
Merci, Madame Balin. Chris Dubkin, International Transport Journal, ITJ from Basel. We've met before. One question as far as the Sea Working Group, Jens, is concerned, because I think that was somehow the peak of the crunch that we had over the last years. You were saying, well, despite the fact that now that the supply chain is less stressed than it used to be, there's little movement on the side of either the carriers or the terminals. But do you see that there's more space for maneuver as far as negotiations with the big carriers are concerned? Because now they're also getting into a trouble they haven't seen for quite a mighty long, well, for about 2 years now. And do you see that there's a change of perspective also from their sides in order to, you know, make the supply chain also more fluid, either for the shipper or the freight forwarder?
I mean, of course, these are commercial decisions, and there are shipping lines who prefer certain stakeholders above others. We, as one stakeholder, are, of course, one of the choices to have or not to have. I think nobody would have expected that what has happened the last half year. Yeah, I mean, nobody could have foreseen it. Same as what nobody could have foreseen what happened 2.5 years ago. I mean, warehouses are full because the just in time, what didn't exist. You know, you had to pray to get your container on board, and so it is just in case. So you order to be sure you can sell your goods. So it's I think everybody has to settle down and find means and ways to deal with this, all stakeholders. I mean, we heard about the 2M alliance, which does not necessarily surprise me a lot, because In my opinion, there are different strategies that possibly don't fit for too long. The timing, okay, I do not know. I mean, also the regulators play an important role for the future. The FMC has been very outspoken, very critical. In Europe, the European Commission, the European block exemption is being discussed. It's a bit of a different story, but it is clear one of the items in the block exemption is that the limit is 30%, and 30% has been increased, or has been hit by 2M a few times in a row. So clearly, the 2M is above the 30%, and possibly it is related to, because the German competition regulators, they have mentioned that they see it as very critical to extend the block exemption. So possibly this was now a jump. Okay, there is also in Europe a tougher view on that to change and get out. So, and with this 2M situation on paper, there's one more competitor, or there's one more provider of ocean freight services. So out of 3 alliances, you have now 2 alliances plus 2. I mean, there's a lot of assumptions, speculations of what's happening. I'm not going to be part of it. And as far as we are concerned, our industry is concerned, we have to use and we will use the providers that are available for us. We offer door-to-door services. A shipping line who transport our containers is just one of various of our suppliers in the global supply chain. So, I mean, Chris, I don't know whether that answers your question, but
just to add on, Jens, yes, you answered it to a certain extent. My idea was you were saying, well, empties are piling up, etc. There was one more point I was driving at. Is it now visible that the carriers again start to create a shortage by taking out capacity of the market, or don't they? Because now they always try, of course, to adapt to the demand, and that's something that I think the freight forwarder is one of the first to feel.
It's difficult, or I think it's not up to me to really comment. As I said, I think it's a surprising situation. Unfortunately, planning certainty is not there yet, because a lot of vessels are being blanked. Vessels on the backhaul are being shipped via the Cape of Good Hope rather than through the Suez Canal, which is also maybe questionable. But I think if you look at these 2 points and you think about it, maybe that answers your question. I don't know.
Thank you. Another question? Yes, sir.
I work for Le Temps. My name is Richard Etienne. The Le Temps is a local paper. It's not specialized in logistics, so I might have some naive questions. Yeah, I think I'm using it. I'm also naive on the mic, perhaps, but but you Mr. Romer, you mentioned decarbonization, the fact that you need new regulations. I was wondering what sort of rules do you expect, and from whom? Would it be the IMO? And to what extent are you talking about some sort of international universal rules? I mean, some sort of game playing field, I guess. Can you perhaps tell me a bit more? And you also mentioned unfair competition. I was not exactly sure how to understand that. Could you perhaps give me some concrete examples?
Maybe I should start with the sustainability. I mean, to start with, yes, the IMO is for sure in the center of such developments. Possibly there are regional developments. I mean, in Europe, you have the European Commission with the ETS, the maritime industry will be part of the ETS system in Europe. The problem is that of course, if you have to buy your personal decision to buy a car, you really have to crack your head, and these are national legislations. Okay, and your car makes it 5 or 8 years or whatever. A ship, I have no idea. I mean, I'm not a ship owner, but you probably talk about 15, 20 years or more. So vessels that are being built in 5 years' time will be in service when we reach some of the goals, 2030, 2050. Okay, so the decisions are much more long-term, and of course you talk about a serious investment, and vessels carry cargo around the world. I mean, the maritime industry is one of the most important industry for us today, because I mean, whatever you buy in the shop is very likely to have been shipped by sea freight to a high degree. So, but it requires, since vessels touch different regions, different countries, different ports, it requires global decisions. And a decision taken, or that seems to be logic for one country, might be against the interest of another country. Because each country, each nation, has their own economy, and you don't want to weaken your economy. I mean, in the car industry, you look at the strong lobbies of some countries. Yeah, I mean, so it requires global decisions for all to have a proper regulation to deal with in the game. But what is of course equally important, I mean, there is no clear rule right now. There is no decision, yeah, because the fuel that you possibly would like to have or eat is not available, or it is not distributed strong enough. You need massive investments in the port to provide the fuel. We need research and developments on ships. What kind of fuel? I mean, there's LNG, there's ammonium, there's methanol. There's so many different options, but the infrastructure is not there yet. So right now there is no solution. So it's a bit of looking into the crystal ball into the future.
But there's something I don't get. Obviously, it's very hard for a ship owner to buy a new ship because they don't know what ship and what engine to choose, because obviously there's no rules. But at the same time, it looks like companies, MSC, but others are buying ships, perhaps second-hand ships, or I don't know what ships, but to an extent that is more or less historical. So I don't get the contradiction here.
I can't comment on that. It's a commercial decision. Of course, what I can say, there are others. If you take the top two, MSC is having a completely different policy than Maersk Line. Maersk Line is not increasing its fleet. They're looking into vertical integration. So possibly MSC is having different plans and focusing on power market domination.
Other questions? Yes, madam.
Hi, good afternoon. So my name is Paula Dupré-Libias. I'm with Geneva Solutions. I actually, on my colleague's question, how much leverage actually do you have? I mean, a lot of the presentation that you've made has been about sustainability, the need to move forward on that, and I have a second question that's related to that, but how much leverage do you actually have? Because you're basically an industry organization, and I mean, you've spoken about the issue of the need for R&D and so forth, but I mean, how much are you saying? How much are you communicating with, with tech in terms of, moving that whole process forward? Are you, where do you stand? I mean, are you actually, representing those shippers who may be somewhat reluctant to move forward, in making the industry more sustainable, or are you actually really committed in trying to actually push for, more regulation, or, finding the capacity to make, the needed change to achieve those goals that, we've been speaking about?
As I said, I mean, we are not ship owners, and we have to use the suppliers that are available for us to satisfy our customers. So to answer your question, of course, the easiest would be we just relax, sit down, and let others deal with it. Yeah, we have to use the ships that are available, and that's it. But I don't think that this is what FIATA stands for, and also not our industry. So yes, we want to participate. We want to understand also, because we want to be able to provide transparency. Because when it comes to allowances, you know, carbon allowances to offset your balance, you know, maybe there's a possibility that we find a way to offer our members to trade with us rather than directly with a shipping line. Yeah, so it is, I mean, I have no idea in which direction it goes, but I think it is important for FIATA. We have two sides of responsibility. Number one, to our members. We need to have transparency. We need to understand what's happening in the market. There are enough surcharges that are not very transparent. So it is really, really important that we understand the market. So we have to understand a lot of technological situations. But on the other hand, yes, we would like to also participate in a dialogue with the other stakeholders. Yes, we are not really concerned. We are not going, we can maybe pity the shipping lines that it's such a difficult decision. On the other hand, I mean, lucky for them, they seem to have some financial resources that is helpful. So, but we want to be a party to the discussions.
You have a comment.
Yeah, if I can just add two things, and I fully agree with what Jens just said. I think we need to see that the needs of the customer is evolving, and we need to be able to provide our members the tools to answer the needs of their customers. And this is about flexibility. This is about being in a position to facilitate this transition to more sustainable transport. So they will ask the freight forwarder, okay, what is and it's already the case, and I know Jens know that much better than me. They ask you, okay, what is the CO2 emission of this alternative of this one? If I bring the goods 2 days later, but I can save on the emission, or so there is this trade-off that comes, and more all our members will have to be able to give answer, to be able to know, to provide this knowledge about the CO2 emissions, and also to provide ways to compensate for this CO2, because we will not move from the world today to the zero emission. We will go through a long period probably of net zero, where we will more try to net the emission. So that's one thing that FIATA needs to accompany the sector and help the sector to play its role to answer the demand of the members. And I think the second aspect is linked to the transparency, is very important. If you leave the decision or the control in only one hand, you are creating, again, a kind of monopoly somewhere in the system. So it's important that the freight forwarding industry play its role, is part of this discussion, knows what is going, and is able also to challenge it. And it's, as it was said, it's about transparency, and it's about of who will pay the price for this transition, because this transition will have a cost for the supply chain in general, and there will be people and actors that need to pay for it. And it's better that all the actors, from the customers to the shipping lines, going through the freight forwarders, they are aware, they understand, they can see understand what is behind, understand how it's calculated, how it comes, in order to ensure that it's not certain that will pay the price, and other that will try to push it to the other actor in the supply chain.
You have a second question, Paula.
Yeah. The other question I had was regarding digitalization, and I'm just wondering, if you can comment at all on, where you see challenges, where amongst perhaps some of these national and regional organizations, there may be issues in that process.
Okay, so I might start. I think we are coming from an understanding where people were thinking there will be one standard, and the objective is to have the standard, the one that will apply to everyone. And FIATA in this area was a bit more pragmatic, and I think now others are also understanding that there will not be one standard. We are in a very fragmented environment in supply chain with different actors, and I think all the different actors will have their standard that answer to their specificity and their needs. So the big question, and all the FIATA digital strategy that was launched in 2020 is based on that, is to say there will be different standards. What is absolutely key is the interoperability between the standards. It's to ensure that we speak the same language, we have the same data model reference, and that we can exchange then the data. And currently we are working with all the different modes of transport, so we have also collaboration with some big shipping lines to work on this interoperability of data, knowing how we can reuse this data that we have as freight forwarder in order to directly in the system of the shipping lines. And I think that will be really the future, will be definitely more different standard, but that can interact between themselves. I don't know if you want to add something. No.
Before giving you, Madam, you have a question? Yes.
Yes, hi. My name is Lucy Morgan-Edwards. I'm a freelance journalist and researcher. I'm very interested in geopolitical issues, actually. My background is environmental, though. I did 2 degrees in environmental sciences, the latter master's degree at Imperial College, where I focused on pollution. And I would say you ought to be lobbying against these sustainable development goals, given the massive problems with inflation that we're facing in the West, given the problems with the supply chains, the stresses that your members must be under. The issue of carbon is a single issue nonsense. And actually, I'm afraid its center is here in Geneva with the United Nations and in New York. You really need to be pushing back against it, because it is not an environmental solution. Carbon is the gas of life. We have many, if people really cared about the environment, they'd be looking at the issue of how to dispose of these lithium batteries, etc. They would be looking at full life cycle analysis of these products, disposal of the products, the child labor that is involved, for example, in the Congo, in trying to get hold of the metals, the heavy metals and rare earths that are needed to build these so-called sustainable vehicles and so on. So rather than allow all your members to have all these stresses on them in terms of building so-called carbon neutral net zero ships and vessels, surely it would be better if you would be starting to question the idea of the Sustainable Development Goals and what really lies behind them, which is really about a financial control system and a system of costing everyone and eventually maybe bringing in climate lockdowns. So maybe it's, time to push back against this nonsense.
Who wants to respond to this comment?
Yeah, I'm impressed. And I have 3 kids, and I have a lot of pressure at home. Like I said, it is our world, but I hope that in a year's time, because we are seriously looking into it, I can comment a bit more, understand a bit more, because obviously it is very, very complex. So I cannot really comment, but as I said, I appreciate and I think we need opinions and see, because possibly we also have to change more drastically the way we live also, I don't know. But because obviously if the best way to reduce carbon is not to ship.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's fundamental to your industry, and it seems to me you need to be starting to maybe hire some consultants to really look into what's really going on and what's really behind this push, because I see a lot of fonctionnaires in Geneva who have no environmental background, who are pushing this net zero agenda, lots of NGOs and organizations throughout Europe, and yet people don't seem to understand the juggernaut that is coming upon us in terms of inflation and stresses in the financial system, and we're not going to have the luxury of deciding about net zero. So maybe it's time to sort of shake up the debate a little bit.
Yeah, you know, I found your point very important and interesting. I think the role of FIATA here in this discussion is more to try to ensure that whatever decision is taken in this process about, it's not to us to decide if we need to go to net zero or not net zero, but that we go to the goal that has been set in a way that is the best possible and having the less negative impact. I think that's our role. We are not deciding for all the policies. And you mentioned lithium battery. I agree. There is a lot of problem with lithium battery. We are handling the question of the transport of lithium battery and the risk that is linked with that. Yeah. It's not to us to be able, because it's not we are not in this position to say if we need to use or not lithium battery, but how we transport them, ensuring that it's done in a way that we avoid some accident, that we care about the safety of the people working in the transport that transport this lithium battery, that they are packed correctly, that they are declared on the manifest of the transport. That is our role. So I think I respect very much your point, and I think there are a lot to say today on where we are going, why we are going to what is fixed, but I think our role is to ensure that this discussion that has an impact on our industry, we can express the voice on our member to ensure that it's done in a way that has sense, and that it also has sense for the activity we represent. That is absolutely key in order to ensure the logistic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Petrov. Thank you, Mr. Graber. Thank you, Mr. Romer. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us today. On behalf of the Swiss Press Club, I thank you. And I think, Mr. Graber, you want to say a few words, because there are some refreshment, I think.
So I think it was a very good discussion, and I think we are just coming to be a little bit warm for the discussion. So maybe we can continue. We have prepared some refreshment, and I think we will also appreciate to have some. So let's continue the discussion. Let's keep in touch also. And I think, Amanda, you wanted to add something?
Yes, sorry, Amanda Stock, Communications Officer at FIATA. I just want to thank all the journalists who came today and took part in this really interesting discussion. For those of you that took part today, I will follow up with a list of resources for those of you who registered by email, if that's fine with all of you. For any questions, feel free to respond to that email, and hopefully we can continue this discussion next year at the next HQ meeting in Geneva, or at the World Congress if you would be interested, from 3rd to 6th of October in Brussels. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
And let's have a refreshment.